Biology is the study of life, but really, it's just chemistry in disguise. I mean, you and I are basically just a big ball of molecules that can make funny sounds. Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids are some of the molecules that are fundamental to life. Carbohydrates give you quick energy, lipids store long-term energy and make membranes, proteins make up tissues, and nucleic acids make DNA. Also, to make all the chemical reactions possible, living beings have inside of them a bunch of enzymes. They're special proteins that act as catalysts, which just means they help chemical reactions speed up by either breaking down or combining one specific thing. For example, lactase breaks down lactose, the sugar found in milk. Okay, so enzymes make life possible by speeding up chemical reactions, but what even is life? Scientists don't really seem to agree, but obviously a cat is different from a rock. The cat can produce energy by metabolizing food, it can grow and develop, reproduce, and it responds to the environment, whereas the rock does not. Also, unlike rocks, every living thing on Earth is made of cells, of which there's two main categories, eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Eukaryotes have fancy organelles which are bound by membranes, like the nucleus inside of which is DNA. Prokaryotes have none of those organelles, and the DNA is just kinda chilling there, like freely floating around. This is why prokaryotes are just single-cell organisms like bacteria and archaea, whereas eukaryotes can form complex organisms like protists, fungi, plants, and animals. These are what's known as kingdoms, which is a taxonomic rank, so basically how we classify different living things and how they're related to one another. Because there are quite a few species of life on this planet, and naming them cat, dangerous cat, and water cat wouldn't really be all that helpful, we also give every species a unique and unambiguous scientific name consisting of the genus and the species. One thing every species has in common is homeostasis, aka keeping certain conditions in check so you don't die. If you feel warm, your body will sweat. If you're cold, your body will shiver. A cell does kind of the same thing, just that it bounces out concentrations of certain chemicals. You see, enzymes, for example, only work in a very specific environment, let's say some specific pH value. If this changes too much, the enzymes will denature and won't work anymore. To counter this, the cell needs to constantly keep up this specific pH value, which is controlled by the concentration of acid and base molecules. Okay, but how does the cell do that? The secret lies in the cell membrane. You see, it's a semi-permeable phospholipid bilayer. Okay, that's way too many words. All it is two layers of these funky-looking molecules with a polar head and a non-polar tail. This allows small molecules like water and oxygen to slip right through, whereas larger particles like ions need special channels that can be opened or closed, which gives the cell control of what goes in and out. Naturally, particles move with the gradient, so from a place of high concentration to a place of low concentration. Or, in the case of water, it can also move to a place of high solute concentration, so for example, salt. Welcome to Biology Pro Tips Season 1. Tip of the day, do not drink too much salt water. There's a bunch of salt in salt water. In fact, more salt than inside of a cell, which means it will draw water from your cells and dehydrate you. Yeah, that's it. Have a great day. Anyway, the process of balancing out gradients is known as diffusion and happens automatically, but by using a little bit of energy, particles can actively be moved against the gradient. The energy comes from adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. To be exact, the highly energetic chemical bonds between the phosphate groups can be broken to obtain energy. This is kind of important, as in every organism and every cell needs to make ATP, for example, through cellular respiration, which happens in the mitochondria. Together with oxygen, glucose, so sugar, is turned into water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. This is nice, but it only works if you already have glucose. Humans are heterotrophs. They eat food, inside of which is sugar, which is then broken down into glucose. Plants, on the other hand, are autotrophs. Simply put, they said, screw food, I'll just make my own glucose by staring at the sun. You see, plant cells have small organelles called chloroplasts, inside of which is chlorophyll, which absorbs red and blue light but reflects green light, which is why most plants look green. The absorbed energy from light is used to split water and make a special form of carbon dioxide, which can then be turned into glucose and oxygen. Okay, quick recap. Once you have glucose, either from food or photosynthesis, you can do cellular respiration to get energy in the form of ATP. Chemically, ATP is what's known as a nucleotide. It has a phosphate group, a 5-carbon sugar, and a nitrogenous base. You know what else is made of nucleotides? Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. It consists of 2 strands of nucleotides with the sugar and phosphate groups, but the actually important part is the nitrogenous base, which comes in 4 flavors: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These bases can form base pairs through hydrogen bonds, where adenine goes with thymine and cytosine goes with guanine. These bonds are what holds the 2 strands of DNA together. Okay, that's cool, I guess, but how the heck does that store genetic information? I'm glad you ask. A gene is a section of this DNA that codes for a special trait by carrying a certain sequence of base pairs, which is like a recipe for making a protein. Why proteins? Because they're like really important. They transport molecules, act as enzymes, and determine the way you look. For example, the difference between brown and blue eyes is the amount of a pigment called melanin in the cells of the iris. The OCA2 gene codes for P protein, which we believe controls the amount of melanin in cells, meaning that the proteins made from this gene could be what determines your eye color. Pretty cool. There's just one issue. Your DNA and its information is in the nucleus, but proteins are made in organelles called the ribosomes. How do we get the information from A to B? The answer is RNA. It's kind of like DNA, just that it's most often a single strand. It uses ribose instead of deoxyribose, and instead of thymine, it uses uracil, which makes it less stable. But that's besides the point. Here's what RNA actually does. Let's say you want to make the protein coded for by this gene. An enzyme called RNA polymerase will split the DNA and make a strand of RNA with a complementary basis, essentially copying the information from the DNA to the RNA. This is called transcription. The new strand is called messenger RNA or mRNA because it carries this message out of the nucleus to a ribosome. Remember how I said that a gene is like a recipe for a protein? Well, on the mRNA, which carries the same base sequence as that gene, every group of 3 bases, which is called a codon, codes for a specific amino acid, which are the building blocks for proteins. These amino acids are carried by special molecules called transfer RNA or tRNA, which have a unique anticodon that can only attach to its matching codon on the mRNA. The job of the ribosome is to read over codons on the mRNA and attach the matching tRNA molecules, which then leave behind their amino acid. As the ribosome moves along the mRNA and attaches more tRNA, which happens a couple thousand times, the amino acids combine into a polypeptide chain, which is just a really long chain of amino acids that can be bunched up, creased, smacked, and folded into a protein. Okay, let's recap. A gene is copied onto mRNA, which is then used to build proteins by assembling a chain of amino acids, aka transcription and translation. Welcome to Biology Pro Tips Season 2! If you want to decode a sequence of RNA, there is actually a chart for that. Yeah, that's all. Have a great day. Oh yeah, did I mention that you have like a bunch of DNA? You have about 20,000 protein coding genes, each thousands to millions of bases long, and that only makes up around 1% of your entire DNA. The rest is just non-coding. Plus, almost every cell in your body contains your entire genetic code, but certain genes can be turned on and off depending on the cell, which is good because otherwise your brain cells might just start making stomach acid, which would not be good. Fun fact, if you were to stretch out the DNA of just one single cell, it would be about 2 meters long. Wait a minute, how does that fit into a microscopic cell? Well, if you were to look inside the nucleus, you wouldn't find the DNA just floating around like this, or even this. No, you would actually find lots of these worm-looking things. To be exact, DNA is coiled up around proteins called histones, which are then condensed into strands of chromatin, which are then coiled up even more to make tightly packed units of DNA called chromosomes, which kind of look like worms. Different sections on a chromosome carry different genes, and the entire human genome is split amongst 23 different chromosomes, although every body cell has 2 copies of every chromosome, one from the mother and one from the father. For most chromosomes, the 2 copies are said to be homologous, meaning that they carry the same genes in the same locations.